Good evening, everyone in Alberta, Canada, and beyond. It is Wednesday, June 21st, 2023. Happy summer solstice. It's actually fairly nice here in Calgary. It rained a lot for the last few days, but we're hoping for, now that it's rained, get rid of the forest fires, and then we can actually have summer. My name is Kerry Lambert, and I welcome you to an online webinar evening of solutions for a new Alberta, brought to you by the Alberta Prosperity Project, also known as APP. Our purpose is to educate, inspire, and unite all Albertans, businesses, and organizations to protect their prosperity, individual freedoms, rights, and sovereignty by empowering the Alberta government to restructure Alberta's relationship with Canada. Of course, we couldn't do this without your help. If this is your first time watching, welcome, and I hope you find this information engaging and want to find out more. And if you're a regular APP webinar viewer, thank you for your support. We couldn't do this without you. APP is membership driven with a goal of 1 million plus members to help steer the political process. APP memberships are 1 year for $20, 2 years for $30, 3 years for $40, or you can make a donation to albertaprosperityproject.com. You can find out more on there. We also have APP merchandise at albertaprosperitystore.com. So I need to get another shirt rather than this, but I mean, how cool is this? I'll get to that in a second. Please, we also have a petition to establish Alberta's independence. And you can also go to bit.ly/AB votes yes. That is AB votes yes. It's a short thing, bit.ly/AB votes yes. I believe it's also on the albertaprosperityproject.com page. And I'm sure Walter will post all that. So first things first, people have been asking me for the last month and a half, where have I been? Why have I not been doing these webinars on Wednesdays? And, kudos to Chris Scott from Whistle Stop Cafe for coming up and basically kind of taking over. And he's done an amazing job and continuing this every Wednesday. So we do this every Wednesday. But I actually ran in the provincial election. And I won't get into all that. That'll be another spiel at some point. But I do want to say that it was a great experience. And although I didn't win, because clearly I'm doing these webinars, but what it did do is it gave me another platform to get out and actually talk to people. So I talked to students, I talked to retirees, I talked to people in bars and restaurants, which I usually do anyways. But to have not only a one-on-one, but to have a different platform and get into the schools, there's really no other way that I think APP can get into a classroom and at least talk about the benefits of having a referendum on independence. So I accomplished what I wanted to do. And so that's kind of my statement on how that went. And it was great to meet so many people out there. Again, a lot of times we're in our own bubble talking, and it's nice to get out of that bubble and actually talk to other people. And so I actually think that was an amazing experience. And one of the reasons why I was wearing my shirt today, just so you have an idea, is I was down in Lethbridge today at the Coots 4 pre-trial that's going on. So if you don't know the story about that, essentially they were arrested in the Coots blockade convoy back in February. I believe the actual date was February 13th. They are still in jail. And we're now at 494 days, I believe. So almost 500 days that they've been in jail. They did have some sort of a bail hearing, and that didn't go. And but the reason I'm telling you this, and again, I went there today to actually see the guys in jail or in the courtroom, and see how they're being treated. And I'm not saying whether or not they're guilty or not. That's up to the courts. But we do need to have some process done with them. And I believe if we had a strong voice, as we try and do with APP, a strong voice collectively as members of APP, as of people that are just concerned Albertans, we might be able to help them out in order to maybe even get them out on bail. They have not seen, or well, I guess they have seen partially their families, but really only in a courtroom setting. Some of them are actually under almost solitary confinement, where they're basically kept in their cell for 23 hours out of a day. And I think that's just total garbage. And of course, the reason why I'm bringing it up on this APP webinar is because we're going to be talking about a lot of the stuff that deals with how can we become independent, or how can we better do sovereignty against the federal government, because really that's the only reason why these guys are still in jail. Is it's through the Crown, it's through the federal government. It's not a provincial matter. They have some serious charges on them, and but if they were in a different situation, if we had our own judges, maybe judges that we could elect, or maybe our own police force, that might all change. So essentially, that's why I wanted to bring that up today, to say that and make awareness that these boys are still in jail. And you can find out more about it on the Facebook page. It's called Alberta. Geez, I should know this off the top of my head. Alberta. Somebody help me out there. Alberta prisoners, Alberta political prisoners. That's what it is. So look under Facebook, Alberta political prisoners. And likewise, you can go online. There's a wonderful person. We've actually had her on a webinar before. It's Granny Mackay, and she is spearheading fundraising efforts for that. And it's under Granny, Granny, and Mackay is spelled Mackay. That's Mackay for us non-Scottish people. And you can go out and find out more. So with having said all of that, whew, look at this, looking at my head all this time. Tonight's webinar was entitled, and I say was, "And Equalization Now" with constitutional litigator Jeffrey Rath, based on a Substack that he did. It's under jeffreyr.substack.com. However, we just found out Jeff is sick, so he will not be able to join us today. But we do have Dr. Dennis Modry, who was going to be talking about the second part of the webinar, and that is to answer the question and answer section from the APP members meeting in Bowden this past Saturday, June 17th. So I'll bring him on in a second. And of course, this is always a live webinar, so we encourage you to ask questions and make comments throughout this presentation. And if you do that, put 3 question marks before the question. That way it's flagged, and I can quickly go through them and find out, what questions you want to ask. And of course, we do have, I don't know how many questions. We've got 33 questions to answer from Bowden's, the APP members meeting on Saturday. So with that, why don't we bring Dennis on? And how are you, Dennis?
Better now.
It's tough being in the back here. Yeah. So.
Well, yeah. No, it's good, Kerry. Enjoyed your introductory comment.
So did you want to maybe mention what happened at the members meeting? I know a lot of people that are members will have received an email back about what transpired and who are the people that are involved. Did you want to maybe touch on that?
Sure. Do you mind if I make just one comment about equalization, and then we'll
please do, because I think that's the reason why most people logged in.
I know, and so I don't want to let those people down. Let me just make the comment. So roughly 62% of the Alberta electorate supported ending equalization. Now, the equalization concept is in the Constitution, but the formula is outside the Constitution. So the formula could be adjusted. Trudeau in 2019 just unilaterally approved it to carry on exactly in the same way that it has been occurring. And of course, the original intent was for the provinces to all get together with the federal government and discuss whether or not the formula should be changed. Mm-hmm. But here's the reality. When that referendum was held, and given its success at 62%, if you wonder why nothing's been done about it, you need to understand that when Jason Kenney organized that referendum and planned for it, it was virtue signaling only. And
Oh.
the reason is because he was smart enough to know that there was no way in which he could force ending equalization. But that's what the majority of the public wanted, was to end equalization. And why he knew that he couldn't end equalization, because in order to end equalization, you have to open and change the Constitution to do that.
Yeah.
And there are 5 hurdles to change the Constitution, which make it absolutely impossible to achieve. And it's just important for people to understand that it just simply is not possible to do it unless the provincial government has the leverage to actually negotiate from a position of strength.
Mm-hmm.
So, for example, if the provincial government was, as you pointed out in your introduction, was empowered consequent to a successful referendum on secession, which triggers the Clarity Act, that forces the federal government to negotiate. And so rather than just thinking about ending equalization, if the provincial government was empowered through a referendum on Alberta secession, it could negotiate everything that troubles Alberta, that we are concerned about, whether it's a moral issue, a freedom issue, or a prosperity and economic issue.
Mm-hmm.
So it's important to understand, and I'll let Jeff, when Jeff comes, he's written a great Substack on equalization.
Yeah.
And it's going to be important for him to express this to all of the listeners. But he wants to work also with the UCP in terms of changing the legislation within the province, because the province actually has more clout than it has exercised. So, for example, just one point, and then I'll leave the equalization thing. The provincial government really has the ability to pass legislation that would end equalization, because in the Constitution, it doesn't say that a provincial legislature can't legislate against equalization. So it's an interesting concept, and I'm not a constitutional lawyer, although I've studied the Constitution. But Jeff makes some very, very good arguments about what the provincial government could do actually to end equalization. So with that, I'll just leave it open.
Awesome. Yeah, so we'll definitely have Jeff on for next week, and likewise, you can go to jeffreyr.substack.com and you can take a look at what he was talking about, and just so that I have an idea, that question that was on whatever it was 2 municipal elections ago, where they actually asked about the ending equalization. Is that really what the question was, is to end equalization?
Yeah, it was. Yeah, okay. It was to end equalization. It wasn't to change the formula.
Yeah.
It was to end equalization. Okay. And I digress for 1 second.
Yeah.
I've got blueberry juice here, although it could be a glass of wine, but it's actually blueberry juice with ice. For anybody that thinks I'm a little tipsy.
I've got prune juice in my Coke here. So.
Okay.
Good. Okay. Well, then I guess that's all we'll really touch on about the equalization for now. So again, if you tuned in specifically for that story, we'll have the expert on next week. But in the meantime, I mean, we can certainly go through a lot of the other questions for sure. And I did want to I wasn't there at the meeting on Saturday. My apologies. I had a lot of work that I needed to catch up on, and it was like I either do this or do that, and then a bunch of other stuff fell out of whack, so I couldn't make it there. And I was really hoping that I would have at least been able to. But I hear that there were a few announcements made. And did you want to say anything about that, Dennis?
Sure. This was a wonderful opportunity to get together with the members, and there were roughly around 500. Present in person, and there were a number of people who tuned in online.
Mm-hmm.
And I was one of the speakers, along with Leighton Gray,
mm-hmm.
Jeff Rath, Chris Scott, Michael Wagner and Corey Morgan.
Mhm.
And it was really a lot of fun. I think we had a lot of good laughs. But we each of the speakers spoke to relevant issues, and there was no repetition. Everything was complementary in terms of speaker to speaker to speaker, and I thought it was really well done. And of course, there was no coordination ahead of time in terms of what people were going to say.
Yeah.
But everybody had 10 to 12 minutes to speak. Some may have spoken for 14 or 15 minutes. But all in all, I thought it really was a wonderful event. And in my mind, it was an event in which the Alberta Prosperity Project is now poised to take the next step. And the next step is really based on a very comprehensive, in fact, the most comprehensive 4-stage business plan, some 90 pages, to get us to the point where the provincial government is empowered to negotiate with the federal government the new terms of our relationship with Canada. So I thought it went very, very well. And for announcements, for those of you who didn't know, Leighton Gray is now the chairman of the board, and as you know, he's a constitutional lawyer and he's First Nations. And Réjean Lavoie, who is the chief operating officer, and for the period of time of my absence, he functioned as the interim CEO. Mm-hmm. He has now stepped aside, and Chris Scott magnanimously, unenviably, has taken on the role as the interim CEO.
Yeah.
And for me, I'm back on the board, and I've taken. I just felt as though from the previous time when I was the CEO, 60 to 80 hours a week wasn't working very well for me. And that's what we were doing, and it was sort of exhausting. And so I've taken a position with respect to APP just as chief strategist, and I'm happy to work with Chris and the operating team, the regional directors, and they're part of that operating team, and to get our business plan going. So Chris is a delight to work with, and I just think it's going to be fantastic getting going. So I see here's the first question, right? Do you want me to answer?
We're on a time limit here.
Yeah, I understand. So this is a good question. It's a 3-part question. And the first question here is for those of you who are viewing this: what is the plan for APP to execute the business plan in the next 1, 2, and 3 years? Now, in an overarching fashion, the point of the timeline of roughly 3 years is that we made a decision that it was going to take roughly that length of time to engage with, educate, and inspire Albertans on the necessity of empowering the provincial government to negotiate from a position of strength. Now, it's quite possible that something very egregious that the federal government does to us could compel Danielle to ask the public for a mandate to negotiate with Ottawa from a position of strength. But regardless of whether that happens or when it happens, our plan is to carry on so that we can educate a plurality of Albertans. And it's important to understand that, roughly 3/4 of Albertans on polling are dissatisfied with the federal government. And if they're dissatisfied with the federal government, it's incumbent upon us helping that 3/4 of the population to move towards empowering the provincial government. If we want to fix it, it's going to be the provincial government that's going to do it. But they will do it as a result of us giving them the intestinal fortitude, stiffening their spine, if you will, to deal effectively with the federal government. So the plan for implementing the business plan has to do to an extent with financing. And I said at the meeting that, executing this business plan requires a lot of money. And so the business plan has a cost to it of $20 million. Now, $20 million is a lot of money. There's no question about it. But I want you to put this in context. The opposition, if you will, the socialists, the Marxists, have spent $1.3 billion with a B to landlock our natural resources. So 20 million over 3 years, whereas it seems like a lot of money, and it is a lot of money, if we break it down into bite sizes, it becomes less onerous. So for example, if you take $20 million, if 10,000 members donated $2,000 each, that's $20 million, or $700 a year for 3 years, or $60 a month for 3 years. But it becomes even easier if there's 20,000 members. That reduces the cost by half. So a one-time donation of $1,000, or a donation of $350 per year for 3 years, or $30 a month for 3 years. But it becomes even easier, doesn't it, Kerry, if we have 100,000 members?
Of course it does.
We're talking a one-time donation of $200. Or basically $70 once a year for 3 years, or $6 a month. And think about if we had 1 million members. Well, then you're just talking about a one-time donation of $20. Now, the issue is what are the dollars used for? Well, it's really important to understand that marketing and advertising is extremely expensive. Billboard advertising, television advertising, radio and TV, getting access into the school systems. And for people who are content creators, videographers, etc., all of these people who are wanting to work with us, many of them, if not all of them, have families. They have obligations. And if they are to do this full time, they can't do it on a volunteer basis. So this project is both a combination of paid performers, paid contractors in various roles, along with a team of a large number of volunteers. And so the 4-part business plan contemplates in phase 1, for example, getting all of the organizations aligned with our objective. We don't want to change what TBA is doing, or take back our freedoms is doing, or Project Confederation, or the Alberta Institute, or the Frontier for Freedom, or any of these veterans for freedom, or any of them. There's some 35 or 40 organizations, and we want them to keep doing what they're doing, but we want them to understand that if they actually want freedom and prosperity, then the way to do it is just synergize with us, get your members aligned with understanding the importance of forcing a referendum on Alberta secession. So that is why we want people to register online their interest, intent, to be motivated to vote in favor of a petition to support a referendum on Alberta independence. And then sequentially, over time in these 4 phases, we want to be able to get to a point where we have a plurality of Albertans that would vote in favor of a referendum on independence. So let me give you an example. If you take just polling, if you want really accurate polls, as you know, many polls are 1,000 people plus or minus a margin of error of 3%. Okay. Well, the reason polls are so variable on a number of different topics is because it depends on where the polling is conducted, what the issue is, and what the timing of the polling is in terms of what people are concerned about. And so if we want to have really accurate polling, we need to poll not 1,000 people, but 10,000 people, for example, one time.
Yeah.
So throughout Alberta, so 2,000 in the north, 2,000 in the south, 2,000 centrally, 2,000 in Calgary, 2,000 in Edmonton. You're looking at polls that are $30,000 or $40,000 each under those circumstances. And then, of course, there are many other expenditures along the way. So when we developed the business plan, it was the entire executive team that developed the business plan, but we had outside consultants. So, for example, we had consultants such as Brett Oland, who's the president and CEO of Bow Valley Credit Union. We had outside consultants from prominent business people, successful business people as well, before we came to finalize this plan, which we worked on diligently for 3 months before we got it to a form where we had vetted all of the costs with multiple providers, multiple marketing and advertising companies, multiple billboard companies, et cetera, et cetera. So in a way, and here's posted now for you to see, this is from the Alberta Prosperity Project website, register for the petition to force a referendum on Alberta's independence. And remember, that referendum on Alberta's independence, by the way, I prefer the term sovereignty, but regardless of that, the concept is, if you want some form of Alberta independence, that is independent from federal government overreach on provincial constitutional authority, then you have to be willing to support a referendum on Alberta sovereignty. Yeah. And like I said, the outcome could be any one of 5 things, but we will get nothing. So for example, if somebody's adamant about Alberta 51, and that's their solution for Alberta independence, you can't get there unless the provincial government negotiates that. If you want Alberta to leave Canada with Saskatchewan, possibly Manitoba, and some of the other places in the West, you can't get there unless the provincial government negotiates those terms of the new relationship, or Alberta becoming an independent sovereign constitutional republic, or Alberta remaining in Canada but with complete control of its wealth and affairs. So you get the point. The whole idea of that referendum, it's simply a tool. It's a tool, like a can opener is a tool to open a can of tomato soup. It's a tool to open and change the Constitution. So we learned a lot in the previous year prior to doing this latest business plan. We learned some things that worked. We learned some things that didn't work, and as a result of sort of retrenching and saying, what do we do now? How do we get everybody? How do we get the 3/4 of the population on board who are disillusioned with the federal government? Well, this is the way to do it. And everybody who has a different perspective on Alberta independence or Alberta sovereignty has to come together on this one point: the referendum to empower the provincial government. That's the referendum on Alberta sovereignty or Alberta independence. So that's the best I can tell you. With respect to the business plan, another question that comes up is, can it be shared with the membership? And I'm going to just say this. This is a decision for the board of directors. This wouldn't be for me to be able to say that. There's a lot of very sensitive information in there in terms of strategy. So for example, if the federal government does this, how would we respond? Or better yet, how would we preempt a response from the federal government or an NGO that doesn't align with Alberta sovereignty or Alberta's quest for freedom and prosperity? So these things are very sensitive, and in the wrong hands, they would undermine our ability to execute our business plan. So one solution could be that for anybody who wants to actually see this, that they sign an NDA ahead of time, and they realize what the consequences are if that business plan is shared with the opposition, for example.
Yeah.
So.
And likewise, I think
I can't say, Kerry, whether the board would agree with that or not.
you're right.
We got two lawyers on our board, Jeff Rath and Leighton Gray, and I don't know what they would think about that question.
And I was going to say, if people want to get involved, they could probably be a volunteer and maybe try and work up to the board. But again, there's going to be a vetting process for that. We're not just going to allow anybody just to come in and have access to that. But if there was somebody that maybe strategically would want to be involved, and then I would say reach out to APP and take a look at it. Maybe it's good to have. You can't have too many cooks, though, right? You can't have too many hands in the pot, because obviously this has been thought out very, very well so far. And one of the things that we were even just talking about earlier about the where would the $20 million go? And if you remember, we had the Alberta government had a vaccine advertising campaign that they said only cost $15 million. Well, I know for a fact from my background in advertising that was a lot more than $15 million, because it was everywhere. It was on radio, it was on TV, it was on billboards. But basically, that's what we would want to educate Albertans, the same sort of media. Like, if we could get that word out everywhere and tell people the benefits of going through this whole process, then we would be able to have people on our that agree with us. And having gone through this whole election process and talking with people, I can easily say yes, 3/4 of the people that I talked to agreed with me, but they were too afraid to vote in that particular way right now. And so I don't think I'll go into any more detail, but that's kind of where it was. We have a lot more people agreeing with us than we possibly think. And one way to make sure that is just go and talk to your neighbor. Maybe you haven't talked to your neighbor in 2 years. Maybe they've been too cooped up or whatever. Just go have a brief conversation with them. You don't have to push them in a direction. Just ask them, so what do you think has been happening? And, people just want to talk. They want to talk about all this stuff. And it's amazing when that door becomes open by a neighbor or by a friend or a family member, it just comes pouring out. So
yeah, you bring up something really important I just want to touch on, because I was actually quite excited about this. So we have just under 10,000 members right now.
Yeah.
But that doesn't tell the story of the impact that we've had.
Yeah.
Jeff Rath thinks we've actually impacted the election, in fact. But here is something. We deal with a company called Meltwater Analytics, and I'm quite really encouraged and enthused by the metrics. So Meltwater Analytics provides analytic information to governments, organizations, societies around the world, and this is the information that they provided to us. It starts with engagements, but I'll just digress for a second and say, if you want to educate and inspire somebody, you have to engage with them first of all.
Yeah.
Our engagement rate, according to Meltwater Analytics metrics, is roughly 2.8 million people, many of whom are followers who have engaged with us.
Yeah.
But that doesn't actually even speak to the reach that we've had. Just on social media platforms, our reach is roughly 22.8 million people.
Wow.
Or maybe it's 28. Walter can correct me.
Yeah.
But on our reach across the entire internet is 119 million. We've had 9.23 million views of our videos.
Wow.
So what does this really mean? It means that we are on the radar of millions of people, not just in Alberta, but across the world.
Yeah.
And we do get inspiring correspondence. I get inspiring correspondence from people all over the place that are encouraging us in what we're doing, because they look at us as a beacon of freedom and prosperity. If we pull off what we have embarked on, that's going to be stimulating for many other areas in the world. So what we're doing is a game changer. And I've always said, if we save Alberta, we may save Canada. And who knows what other areas of the world we'll save as well.
That's right. Yeah. Yeah, and even just looking back through some of the comments, like people are. I like it when people actually say hello from London, Ontario, hello from the Yukon, because it really gives you a sense of how far the reach is. And I know even on our Chris and Kerry podcast, we have a map that's even on our page that shows the entire globe, and we're in Australia, we're in the Netherlands, obviously, we're in Asia, and a lot of that also comes through Alberta Prosperity Project. So yeah, we're not just alone. There are many, many people from everywhere checking out what's happening in Alberta, and especially during the election, they were all over that.
Yep.
So here's a question: are the APP movements happening elsewhere in Canada, such as Manitoba and Saskatchewan? And that's from Sharon.
Right. So the answer to that is yes. There's been a movement attempted to get going in Saskatchewan, but beyond that, there has been discussions with Central Okanagan, but I haven't seen a whole lot materialize. I think we're going to see a lot more occur in the near future, and I say that because I think there's been a lull in activity in people's thinking, waiting for this Alberta election to unfold. And I think if the NDP had been elected, it would have been very disconcerting for many people, and they wouldn't know really where to go or what to do. And probably many people would leave the province along with businesses, which is what happened when the NDP were elected before. But this I can tell you. There is a national organization called I think it's the Frontier for Freedom. I think the head office is in Manitoba. Peter Hall is the president and CEO of it. I think it's that, and they are working with us as well. So very excited about that. They have a branch in Abbotsford, and I was talking to a gentleman from there the other day. And so our intention is to be working with them as well. So not necessarily an APP movement in Manitoba or in some of these other areas, but definitely a movement that is aligned with what it is we are educating the public about. Except in Saskatchewan, there is an APP movement, but I'm not sure where it's at right now. And actually, Chris and I and Roger Hodkinson actually spoke in Swift Current last year.
Yeah. That's right. Yeah. Well, hopefully they'll reach out and let us know what's happening over there, and I believe it would just be SPP.
That's right.
So then, let's go through some of the questions here. So, people I meet sometimes say APP is not about separating, including some in this room. So obviously this was a Bowden question. Doesn't this cause separatists in the room to get frustrated and want to leave APP?
Well, that really is an excellent question. Actually, all the questions are excellent, but I particularly like this one because it's like I said earlier. If you want Alberta to leave Canada, how do you want it to leave? Do you want it to leave and join the U.S.? Do you want it to leave and become an independent, sovereign, constitutional republic? Or do you want it to leave with Saskatchewan and somewhere in some other regions in the West? Well, the truth of the matter is that you have to have all of the different perspectives on what separation means coming together. And it's like I said earlier, what does independence mean? What does separation mean? Separation could mean for some people that Alberta stays in Canada, but it's completely unaffected by the federal government. In other words, it has complete control of its wealth and affairs consequent to an Alberta Constitution, which trumps the Canadian Constitution. Or Alberta leaves and joins the US, or Alberta becomes an independent, sovereign, constitutional republic, or, like I say, Alberta leaves with some other regions in Canada. But everybody has to realize that in order to get a plurality to vote in favor of Alberta independence or Alberta sovereignty, all of these different perspectives have to align. Even the people who don't want Alberta to leave Canada, but they want complete control of our wealth and affairs.
Mhm.
Those people also have to vote in favor of independence or Alberta sovereignty,
Mhm.
because the legal pathway out is that referendum, when successful, triggers the Clarity Act.
Mhm.
And the Clarity Act is that legal pathway for Alberta to leave Canada. But under that circumstance, it's the provincial government that is negotiating with Ottawa and the other province about the terms of a new relationship with Canada. And in terms of a new relationship with Canada can be that Alberta is an independent country, sovereign, but we will still have terms of a new relationship with Canada, right?
Mhm.
And and so for people who can't get their head around the importance of us all coming together, voting in favor of a referendum on Alberta independence or Alberta sovereignty, if you can't understand that we need all to come together, and you're not willing to support empowering the provincial government consequent to that referendum on independence, then we can't win.
Yeah.
Okay, we have to win by getting all of the perspectives voting in favor of that referendum on independence. So we don't want different organizations such as Take Back Alberta, Take Back Our Freedoms, etc. We don't want them to change what they're doing. Carry on doing what you're doing.
Yeah.
Just synergize with us on this one issue, that you will vote in favor of a petition that forces a referendum on Alberta independence. So, so I don't want people to get frustrated and want to leave the Alberta Prosperity Project, because we're not about separating. We absolutely are about separating, but it's separating in a way in which it works for the majority of the public that will vote in favor.
Yeah.
So for me personally, I would like to see Alberta leave Canada, but with Saskatchewan and some other regions in the West,
Mhm.
and form a new country.
Yeah.
Second choice would be Alberta becoming an independent, sovereign, constitutional republic. And my third choice would be Alberta remains in Canada, but with complete control of our wealth and affairs. So in a way, we would be independent, but we would be within Canada, but the federal government would have really virtually no control of us.
Yeah.
So I've often said to people, they've said, well, what would the federal government do? And in my opinion, the only thing that they would do is arrange meetings,
Yeah.
and maybe run the military, and
Mhm.
that's it, you
Okay.
know. So
But again, that would be something that would be on the table to say, you know what, if we take care of this and this and this, maybe if you guys do take care of the military, then instead of calling it an equalization payment, maybe we just call it a military payment. Or I'm just kind of making stuff off the top of my head. But the point is that we need to get to the table in order to have these discussions. And
That's
really,
right.
the only way that we can do that is to educate Albertans what the benefits of doing this would be, and then obviously come up with some sort of a clear question.
Yeah.
And ideally, and I know, Dennis, you've talked about this before, have some stuff in place already. Maybe if a big thing is we need our own police force, then we've at least looked at that and have a plan in place, or our own taxation, or our own pension plan, or those.
Well, the
sorts of
provincial
things.
government's already on the record for wanting to take control of policing, pensions, immigration, employment insurance, and provincial tax collection.
Perfect.
And that doesn't even require a referendum, although Danielle Smith has said she would hold a referendum on repatriating the pension plan.
Yeah.
But it's unnecessary for her to do that. But the real issue in terms of our own sovereignty is when we control all of our wealth.
Mhm.
So that means taking control of federal taxation,
Yeah.
and then getting rid of the carbon tax,
Yeah.
Getting rid of Bill C-69, Bill C-48, ending the Canada Health Act, which
Yeah.
prevents creative solutions to healthcare. And by the way, I don't know if the listeners are aware of the recent bill that's in the Senate, and it's section S-243. And S-243 is an act that will restrict the financial institutions for providing capital to the hydrocarbon industry. And the way they've done it is they've said, if a financial institution provides capital to the hydrocarbon industry, the financial institution has to charge 25% interest.
Wow.
Well, as you can see right there, that would basically dry up the funding for the hydrocarbon industry. So I ask myself the question, to just rhetorically, with respect to Daniel Smith, what's your red line? Is the red line this bill? Is it the bill that is before the Supreme Court right now, in which Bill C-69 will carry on? Is it a new bill that might come with rescinding the 1930 Natural Resources Transfer Act? I mean, all of these things should be a red line in my mind to call for a referendum on secession.
Yeah. Let's throw up another question there, Walter. Is it a mistake to ask Albertans who want to stay to vote to leave in order to negotiate a better deal in Canada?
Well, that's an interesting question. Is it a mistake?
Yeah.
Well, is it a mistake for Albertans who want to stay in Canada to be subjected to the restrictions that are coming? Is it okay to for those people who want to remain in Canada to accept on an ongoing basis to be overgoverned, overregulated, and overtaxed? Is it okay for our standard of living to be dramatically reduced? In fact, Jack Mintz has said ending our hydrocarbon industry will result in a 1/3 reduction in the average income of Albertans. Is it okay to stay in Canada if you are opposed to biological males competing in sports with females?
Yeah.
Is it okay to remain in Canada if you are opposed to the teaching of multiple genders and transgenderism in the schools? Is it okay to remain in Canada, for example, when you're losing your freedom of speech, such as intended with Bill C-18? And is it okay to remain in Canada if schools, colleges, and universities will censor conservative thought and prevent debates in which there might be a conservative thought expressed? These are the kinds of things that are happening. And if we stay in Canada without doing something, are you okay with the implementation of the WEF UN Agenda 2030 and the implementation of the Great Reset, along with a digital ID and central bank digital currency and a social credit score that will track and control everything that you do and prevent you from even accessing your account if you want to purchase something that they don't agree with, such as another round of steaks, or travel someplace because you've already left too much of a carbon footprint?
Yeah.
So the question is it truly appropriate then to remain in Canada if you are going to be completely subjugated and controlled in everything that you do? If you love central government control, and if you love being, losing your freedoms and rights and your prosperity, and that you want the government to provide you safety and security, well, the reality is, as it's been said, if you give up safety for security, if you give up prosperity for security, you'll have neither under central Marxist control.
Yeah.
So I would say to the answer to that question, it's incumbent on people who value Canada, value the original values and principles upon which Canada was created. It was created based on Judeo-Christian values. Well, those are being tossed out the window right now.
Yeah.
But if you value those things, well, we can retain those values and principles by standing up for Alberta. And the only way to do that is through a referendum on Alberta secession. And people who are concerned about leaving Canada, just remember, Canada has already left us in terms of values and principles and freedom and prosperity. So this is the only way in which we can retain, the family as being the pillar of society, pass on values and principles and accountability and responsibility and a work ethic and critical thinking to future generations. Yeah. We need to retain the importance of the family, and the importance of the family is being wrested asunder.
Yeah. Now that's all great stuff. And that's kind of why we do these webinars, and that's why we want to get the word out. And, you brought up C18, and there's also C11 too, which is basically impacted us. So somebody was asking how many people are actually watching this online. There's about 100, 120, let's just say. That number should be 600 to 1,000. And the reason is a lot of people don't see these until after it's been started, or maybe they'll see it in a couple of days, because that's the way Facebook and wherever else you're watching is set up to do that. So if you can, and if you think this is valuable to you and maybe your friends on your Facebook or wherever you're watching it from, share it. Don't be afraid of doing that. And I think we're at the point where we don't need to be scared of what people think about us right now. They already know that we're where we're going and where we stand. And by all means, I think it's important that everyone take a stand and share it on your Facebook and or share it on Instagram or wherever you happen to be, because the only way we're going to win this and is to educate people and to get the word out as much as possible. So I see right at the bottom it says share this video with your friends, and I think that's exactly what we need to be doing. So hopefully everybody out there can do that. So here's another question. Since there are much more followers on Facebook, etc. right now than members, can a crowdfund be done for advertising?
Yeah, I think it could be done, and it's something that we thought about. We haven't executed that plan yet, but I think the issue here is we could do this. For example, targeted at specific tasks. So in other words, we want to have a billboard campaign to get our message out. This is what Pattison Group is going to cost us. This is what another group is going to cost us. And we think we'll get the biggest bang for a buck with this group. And here's why. And we're going to try and crowdfund this. And yeah, that's something that we certainly can do. And the members meeting was really fundamentally a relaunch of APP along with the new business plan. So we're just getting going, and it's a great idea, and we can definitely target that, and we'll trial it. We'll see how it goes.
Yeah.
Somebody
just posted a donate to help us protect Alberta's sovereignty, and it's under Alberta's Prosperity Project. Nation builder, blah blah blah. And so and you can just go on the Alberta Prosperity Project website and please, if you can, make a donation. Nothing is too small. Again, if there's 3 million people and they all donate $1, that's $3 million. So we can do that. Chris Scott is posting from the Whistle Stop Cafe. He's unable to join us, but he's certainly diligent on his Android phone. So he actually said, I'm not sure if you can find this one, Walter, but the fundraising idea is one of the reasons APP does not issue tax receipts. Those who donate will not be identified to the federal government. So that's another important thing, right? And
that is exactly correct. Yeah. People, in this era of cancel culture, if you're donating to a cause that seems to go against the leftist narrative, people and businesses can get attacked. And
Yeah.
so that really is the most important reason, is that we do want donors to financial donors to maintain their anonymity, and we have committed that those names will never be released.
Yeah, awesome. Let's throw up a couple more questions there, Walter. What are your ideas for dismantling government bureaucracy that is not pro-Alberta and wastes our money?
Yeah, that's a great question. Let me answer it in two ways: federally and provincially.
Yeah.
So federally, of course, if our empowered government charts a new path forward for Alberta and restructures our relationship with Canada, we've eliminated the federal bureaucracy. Okay, so that would be gone. And the federal bureaucracy is so inefficient that compared to private enterprise, providing a product or a service at $1, it costs us through the federal government providing that service $3. That's how inefficient the bureaucracy is.
Yeah.
Provincially, the bureaucracy is also bloated. It specifically got bloated as a result of when the NDP were elected in that 4-year period, and the Alberta Prosperity Project can only encourage and recommend to the provincial government. It's up to them to make the changes, but the provincial government is aware that there is a bloated bureaucracy. I'd like to see the provincial government do what Ralph Klein did. And what Ralph did is he targeted the largest portfolios, several of the largest portfolios, and he basically tasked them to cut 20 or 30% out of their budget. And this emanated as a result of discussions with the business community when Ralph posed the question, what do you think needs to be done? And the answer was, you need to rein in spending. And so the various MLAs on their portfolio, such as Steve Smith, basically told the bureaucracy, told the deputy minister, you need to cut 20% out of your budget, and if you don't do it within 30 days, we'll replace you with somebody who can. So, in other words, a hard stance needs to be taken, because there's a lot of people that are working in the bureaucracy that would be better off working in the private sector. And if this provincial government really believes in less governance and less taxation and less regulation, then obviously they need less personnel, right? So, and I understand the new cabinet is smaller than the former cabinet already. So, so that's a good thing. And I imagine there'll be some people who will be terminated, and there will be others who will retire without being replaced. And so this is a process, and we'll have to see how the UCP government handles this. Yeah.
I'm just going to interrupt that question there, Walter. There's another question here. Will there be presentations in Alberta again? APP presentations. We actually have a core group of people that it's our operations meeting we do on Mondays, and we actually had this conversation in regards to doing a bunch of different events. We're talking about maybe doing a movie and having a presentation and speakers after. And yeah, so we definitely want to get to that. Doing it during the summer, I'm not even sure if that's the best time to do it, because of course everyone's busy during the summer and our summer's so short. But we will definitely be looking at that, and we also need to know where to do these presentations as well. So it's easy to just say do it in Calgary and Edmonton, but if you're in a town I've never even heard of, and yet you have 200 people that want to be APP members, by all means reach out to us and let us know, because
or at least have a presentation.
Yes, absolutely, because we had 130 chapters, I believe, and it's kind of dwindled down to 30. But that doesn't mean the numbers have dwindled, and I want to definitely make it so people understand that. What we've got is, the election came along and a bunch of other things, and people ended up looking in different directions. And now that the election's done and we want to get people back on track, we still have the same number of people, but we may not have chapter leaders, or we may not have people involved in putting together events or anything like that. So that is definitely what we want to have, again, from these. Get involved. And we've said that right from day one. We need volunteers. We need people to get involved. And, sometimes you get involved in one group and it just filters off into another one. So, of course, I'm involved in a bunch of different groups, but yet I volunteer my time in those different groups. So it's not like I'm just an APP guy. I can be something else. And I think if people recognize that they can get involved in doing what they love and what they're passionate about, and then say, yes, we can do this. Oh, and there's another event over here, and it's a short drive away, or I really feel like I should be involved, then by all means, let us know. Walter just posted, want to host a local event? Contact us at contact@albertaprosperity.com. And you can also, any comments in regards to that as well, and how the operations team can be looking at things in the fall, by all means, let us know. Okay, now we can go back to the question. If the Conservatives win federally in a couple of years, because I think it's actually, it's 2025, I think, is technically when they could do their next election. Do you believe Alberta's position would change in Confederation?
Yeah, that's another good question. So if Pierre Poilievre and the Conservative Party are elected, and let me emphasize, there's no guarantee that they will be. But if they are elected, it won't change anything, because remember, in order to be elected, you've got to cater to the wishes of Quebec and Ontario, because that's where the voting power is. And in order to remain elected in a subsequent election, again, you have to cater to the wishes of Quebec and Ontario, which is why Confederation, one of the reasons why Confederation has failed, is because we started off as a colony to serve the interests of the East, for them to be able to pillage our wealth. And nothing's going to change. They're not going to give up on, the $60 billion that we give every year in federal taxes. We get back 27. I mean, it's instructive to know that when equalization started in 1965, along with the national energy policy, we've given nearly $700 billion to the federal government, for which we haven't received a cent in return. And then, as you know, we overfund the pension plan by $3 billion, EI by $1 billion. And so nothing is going to change, even with Pierre Poilievre in place. Now, let's just say, for example, he said, well, we're going to end equalization. Well, that's going to require a constitutional change. There are 6 provinces of the 10 that benefit from equalization. Do you think they're going to vote in favor of ending equalization? No, they're not. So there's really no future for Alberta within Canada under the current construct that the Constitution has imposed on us. So nothing will change. We always do a little bit better with the Conservative government in power, but it's not enough to move the needle. And then what happens, 4 years after Pierre Poilievre is elected?
I was just going to say that.
We can lose again. We're right back in the same mess.
That's right.
And right now, we're facing down the barrel of that WEF-UN agenda, which is coming at us like a freight train. And we're seeing what the federal government is doing to us with the implementation of these various bills, which are doing nothing to benefit Alberta and everything to benefit the East, and this false narrative of climate change.
Yeah, all very good points, and it really does. I was going to say about what happens in 4 years after that, because we seem to be just swinging that pendulum. And likewise, we've had a few conservative prime ministers, at least in my lifetime. And yeah, things are a little bit better, but they're certainly not where we want it to be. And, Alberta certainly is getting the short end of the stick when it comes down to that. So here's a good question. How much money goes to Ottawa compared to returns back, obviously, to Alberta, Manitoba, and Saskatchewan?
Well, I can't speak to Manitoba and Saskatchewan, but I can tell you that insofar as Alberta is concerned, just on federal taxation alone, we give roughly $60 billion a year. Yeah. Federal transfers that come back on health and social services and infrastructure, we get back 27. Yeah. So they have $33 billion from us that they use for virtue signaling causes, yeah, and for paying for things that don't align with our values. Gee, for heaven's sake, they can't even look after our veterans, yeah, notwithstanding maintaining a highly functioning military. Yeah. And then of course we've got equalization, which is another cost on top of that, yeah, of several $1 billion a year. Yeah. So, we're losing at in every way, economically, morally, in terms of imposing, moral values that don't values that don't align with our original Judeo-Christian, yeah, values, and what was the foundation for this country. Yeah. So we're even talking about not celebrating Remembrance Day, for example. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And other things like that. It really is sort of bothersome. Yeah. More than bothersome.
This is great. We're getting lots of questions in here. So, hey guys, maybe I totally misunderstood an email a while back from APP, but I thought Dennis was leaving and APP was done.
Well, let me respond to that. APP doesn't necessarily need Dennis Modry. I left on February the 6th because I had to deal with a personal problem, not completely resolved. But the interesting thing is when you're facing something tragic, and you need to step away, you realize after a period of time that your heart and soul and your mind is still with the cause, and the cause is what the Alberta Prosperity Project has been doing. Mm-hmm. So just a couple of weeks ago, I had suggested to the board that I'd be willing to come back on the board. I didn't feel as though I could take on the responsibilities of the CEO, not at least until I had my problem resolved, and I'm not sure I ever will, but if I do, that would be a consideration. But I'm not advocating for that. So I just decided that if the board wanted me back, I'd come back on the board, and I'd play a role to help with our new CEO, Chris Scott, mm-hmm. And help him and help the operations team from a strategic perspective. So I took a position with APP, yeah, as just chief strategist. Yeah. So I'm happy to weigh in, whenever I can to help, yeah, this movement, yeah, move along. So.
And APP is not going away. No, we've all invested way too much time and effort for sure, and the message is just clear. Like it's even if for some reason APP itself folded, and so here's we were at an APP chapter meeting last night in Pinoka. Chris Scott was actually speaking there, and I was there just kind of hanging out, if you want to call it that. But the conversations we had, and Chris even brought it up during when he was speaking, was even if APP something happened and folded, that community of people is still so strong, like-minded, that they will keep pushing forward. And I think that's the important thing is APP is not just this society that it's the only thing that can ever possibly go down this road. It's a vehicle that we can use to drive down that road. But if something happens, by all means, get involved and get involved with us. And if that doesn't work for you, get involved with somebody else or a different group that is like-minded as well. And I think that's the important thing, is that, you know, we've sat around for so long, and myself, I was not involved in politics. I really had I didn't care about it. It was all, you know, business for me, and pleasure, going trips and all that kind of stuff. And things, as you well know, took a turn in 2020, and that certainly opened my eyes to what's important. And I've always put my family and friends first, and they still are. But I think, you know, looking at how things have gone these last 3 years, and especially the other stuff that I'm involved with now, I think everyone should really be looking and saying, what could I have done differently, you know, even 10 years ago? And whatever you possibly think that you could have done 10 years ago, do it now. Why not get involved with something that you believe in, and get involved with a group of people that you enjoy actually spending time with? You know, without getting into too much detail, you know, I had a group of friends, or a group of acquaintances, more like it, that I would go out and do stuff with, only because, really, for the most part, that was kind of my core friends and my more core group, and that's all I could really do. And now that I look at it, and it's like the only reason I was with them per se was because that was the only option given to me at the time. But now I've got so many other friends in such a community that I feel blessed to having even gone through this whole COVID madness, because that's the reason why I obviously went through it, so that I could be involved in things like this. So
that was an awakening.
it was absolutely an awakening.
Yeah, I would suggest, though, it is important for APP to survive, because you do need a vessel or a vehicle, if you will, that can galvanize everybody and help foster this community of people that value individual freedoms, rights, and prosperity. So I think it's really important for the Alberta Prosperity Project to survive. And let's assume, for example, that we are successful, and that referendum on Alberta independence is successful,
Yes.
and the provincial government restructures our relationship with Canada, whether it's within Canada or without Canada.
Yeah.
APP needs to survive beyond that. And I'll tell you why. Because subsequent to World War II, the socialist Marxists have been relentless at working to implement their so-called Communist Manifesto.
Mm-hmm.
And they've infiltrated the school systems, in various institutions, corporations, and government.
Yeah.
And we, as conservatives who value freedoms and rights, individual freedoms, rights, and prosperity, have been asleep at the switch.
Yeah.
And we haven't pushed back. And so we're now at a point where we are pushing back. But when we are successful, we still need to be diligent subsequently. And APP's role subsequently, you know, in 5 years from now, 4 years from now, will be to maintain that diligence, that conservative diligence, to protect the values and principles upon which we were founded.
Yeah. And of course, Chris Scott needs to chime in. Raz. Achieving Alberta independence can only be accomplished with an organized, dedicated group that works to educate Albertans as to the rationale behind independence. APP is that educational group, and that I totally agree with that. Thank you, Chris. Yeah. So let's go for another 15 minutes, anyways, and see what other questions we can answer. Because I know, again, we had like 33 questions. Some of them I think were repeats, but I want to kind of go through that. Is the work on a draft constitution being completed?
Well, so actually, the answer to that is yes, it has been.
Okay.
It needs more vetting, but it's a constitution that is supreme to the Canadian Constitution. Okay, so and it needs to be ratified by the provincial government. Okay, but before it goes to the provincial government, it's going to need to be ratified by APP members before we can give it to the provincial government and see what they have to say. So I know Leighton has been working on various components of it as well, and we haven't worked on it for a while now. It's been a few months, but that's because in part we were waiting to see the outcome of the election, and it was more important for us to complete the business plan with the expectation that the NDP would not be elected. Yeah.
Do you have a draft of it, the Constitution, up anywhere that anyone can look at?
No, we haven't posted it because I think it's, it's been contributed by various people, and I think there are some issues in it that Jeff and Leighton really need to weigh in on. Okay. But I would suggest this, that I think it would be, and it's part of the business plan, by the way, is to get that out sometime in this next 6 months. Okay. So the 6 month schedule, like I said, there are 4 components to the business plan, 4 timelines to the business plan, and in the next 6 months, hopefully we can roll out a draft constitution for people to weigh in on and give us their feedback, see what they have to say. Yeah. Now you can get a bit of a clue to some of it because it's there are concepts that are contained within the policy and governance material that's on the website.
So RA asked, and I did see that, so Ebony just managed to repost it. Alberta being landlocked is being brought up again. Can Dr. Modry explain again, please?
Sure. Yeah, that's a question that comes up a lot, particularly by people who say, oh, there's no darn way that you guys are going to pull this off. That'll end the economic reality of Alberta, et cetera. So let me explain how this can work. For one thing, I want to make mention to those people who have bought into the Kool-Aid that business would pull out of Alberta and investment would pull out of Alberta if Alberta became an independent nation. That's an independent nation unto itself, or an independent nation with Saskatchewan and some other regions in the West. The reality in life is that business will always move to the most, to the best economic and regulatory environment. So if taxes are the lowest in the world and the regulatory environment is the best for getting things done, business will be here. They will relocate here because of that. On the issue of being landlocked, well, there's a couple of things to be said. I'm not a fan of the WEF and the UN, but the UN agenda, the UN treaty, which is it's called the it's a treaty on the it's the convention on the just forget the terminology, but in any case, this is Convention on the Law of the Sea. That's what it is, a Convention on the Law of the Sea. Articles 124 and 125, according to the United Nations, give landlocked countries access to tidewater. So if we didn't have access to tidewater, then the federal government and the BC government would be moving against the UN, that UN resolution. Now, we're not really landlocked, we're policy locked.
Yes.
Okay? We're policy locked because of Bill C-69 and Bill C-48.
Yeah.
So we get out from under those and that problem is solved. I would say this as well. It's not in the interest of BC or the rest of Canada to embargo Alberta because we're not without clout. In fact, we would have more control of the development and transport of our natural resources as an independent nation than we do now. And the reason for that is because, not just because of the UN resolutions 124 and 125, but more because we have the ability as an independent nation to block the transport of people, goods, and services across our borders from east to west and west to east. And we have the ability to block flyovers as well.
Yeah.
So is that in the interest of the rest of the country? I don't think so.
Mhm.
So I think, it would be very likely that if Alberta didn't get what it wanted in negotiations and made a determination because they have the moral and legal legitimacy to become an independent nation, that Alberta would become an independent nation, and then it would be in the interest of the rest of Canada to negotiate terms of how trade would work,
Mhm.
and that sort of thing.
That's right.
So it would. I mean, when you think about the massive amount of cargo and agricultural products, etc., that go out of our port in Richmond, in the Vancouver area, it's massive from Asia. And so what we ship and what we receive, and so like I say, it wouldn't be to the benefit of the rest of Canada. Now, some people have said, oh well, they could just ship it through the U.S.
Yeah.
Not so easy to do that. And who knows what's going to happen with the next U.S. election?
Mhm.
In the next U.S. election with a Republican Party in power, they probably wouldn't even allow that to occur.
Mhm.
They would support Alberta.
Yeah.
Certainly, if Trump was the president, he would be very much in support of Alberta.
Somebody did ask, is Alaska not interested in working with Alberta, even looking at a railway to join the two areas together? Again, I think that could be on the table. Like anything could actually be on the table. And it just
we would want that. I mean,
yeah.
if you think about it, that would be a great corridor from central Alberta to Alaska.
Yeah.
With all of our agricultural products, mineral products, and oil products, and oil and gas, and diesel, etc.
Yeah.
So yeah, and that's why Trump recommended that there be a rail line from central Alberta to Alaska.
Yeah.
And then of course Trudeau said, well, that's a non-starter. So.
And what is the status? Do you know the status of going through Churchill? I know.
Yeah, I do.
Okay.
We don't want to go through Churchill because of the problem with the muskeg.
Okay.
So the rail line, when it gets closer to Churchill, I think it's just a few hundred miles of muskeg, but that track is almost impossible to maintain. It costs millions and millions of dollars a year to maintain that track. It'd be much better to go to Port Nelson, where a deep water port is already there.
Yeah.
It may require a little bit of excavation, but that would be a better site.
Yeah.
And as the listeners on this call might recognize, there has been an agreement between the Alberta, Saskatchewan, and Manitoba governments to work towards a utility corridor to Port Nelson.
Yeah.
And here it's coming up on the map. Don't know if everybody's gonna be able to see it all that well, but
so there's Port Nelson,
Nelson.
And the reason is I think it's all this in here is the muskeg.
Yeah.
This color here. So yeah, you're right. If we ended up going something like this, again, I'm not an engineer, but that would be kind of the idea, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
That is the idea, and so that's why Port Nelson has been discussed. What I'm worried about with respect to this utility corridor is that the Manitoba voters may vote in an NDP government.
That's
and if
true.
they do this fall, when I think the election is October or November, if they do, then since the Manitoba NDP government is controlled by the federal NDP government, as are all provincial governments, there would be the likelihood that the Manitoba government wouldn't go along with that utility corridor, even though First Nations are all on board. Yeah. They're all on board, just as First Nations are on board with the utility corridor to the West Coast, to Kitimat or Prince Rupert. So I mean, these are things that have to be negotiated and carried out. But at least right now, it seems as though that utility corridor is likely to go ahead. subject to what happens with the next election in Manitoba.
So let's do two more questions, only because I would like to save some of those maybe constitutional type of questions or equalization for Jeff for next week if he's able to come on. And I know Chris probably wants to come on next week as well, and maybe we can get other people involved as well. So even though we're not answering all the questions tonight, we're answering a few of the pertinent ones that were asked in Bowden. And so let's try and finish off just a couple of those. Let's see if Walter can post a couple more up here. What can we do to prevent the legislation happening in California that says if parents don't affirm their kid's gender, that social services can take the kids? And Eileen asked that at Bowden.
Yeah, that obviously is of great concern, because it is true that the way things are unfolding is parents are progressively losing the freedom to be the moral, cultural, and social pillar of society, to pass on to future generations values and principles, accountability, responsibility, work ethic, and critical thinking. And so this is all part of what the socialist government, and even if you've heard President Biden speak, he doesn't talk about parents' children. He talks about our children. They're the state's children. And when it gets to a point where the state thinks that they're the parents, then they can take your children for any reason that doesn't align with central government thinking and socialist thinking. So this is definitely a concern, and it's a really good question. So the answer to that question, as far as I am concerned, is just about every problem that is plaguing us and every problem that could come about in the future can be resolved and prevented if we come together for common cause. And we have a government that will protect our fundamental values and principles, that will actually protect them. Will the UCP government do that? I don't know yet. And I don't think anybody does. But I will say this: in a previous conversation that I had with the Premier early on, before she even decided to make a run, I asked her the question, if you're going to run for government office, are you a value or principle-based leader, or are you a leader that leads based on polling? And she said, to her credit, that she would be a value and principle-based leader. So I said, well, value and principle-based leaders are leaders like Margaret Thatcher. And she did not compromise on values and principles. And if you want to be the Iron Lady of Alberta, you will never be able to compromise on values and principles. Now, I didn't get into the details of what her values and principles are, but we will find out.
But and even saying that, she could hold her values and basically say, no, Trudeau, this is not going to happen. The issue that could happen would be that she gets ousted by her party, and then we have somebody else come in. So I think the important thing would be, if she is going to bat for us, we need to stick behind her and say this, we need to give her the support that she needs in order to maintain our freedoms.
Yeah, there's a nuance to that, though, Kerry. Support doesn't come necessarily by saying we support Daniel Smith. Support comes by saying we support these values and principles, and we support these policies, and we support this governance concept. And it's up to her and her caucus to get on board with those values and principles if they want to govern in a way in which their governance is based on values and principles. and that they don't compromise on. So we'll see, because you have to remember, Kerry, we have to maintain a nonpartisan perspective. And we can support Danielle indirectly by supporting values, principles, and policies and governance.
Yeah. All the problems we face today are happening globally as well. That is true. Thankfully, Danielle Smith formed the government here, but there is only so much she can do to protect us from the feds. And thankfully, we have the APP. But how do we stop this madness globally? We need APP chapters across the globe. That's the easiest way.
So I'm gonna share something with you now that I think you're gonna find exciting. So we're working with Alberta Free Inc. as well. Alberta Free Inc.'s concept is if Alberta was an island unto itself, how would we be self-sufficient and resilient in this world? Okay, so they're working on energy security, working on agricultural security, working on communication security, et cetera, et cetera. Now, as you know, Jordan Peterson is having a meeting in London in October. And that meeting in London is designed to be an alternative to the World Economic Forum, right? You guys are aware of that.
Yeah.
So Jordan Peterson is having this meeting to be a counter to the World Economic Forum. So what Alberta Free Inc. is doing, along with ARC, which is Jordan Peterson's company, along with the Alberta Prosperity Project, is to hold an annual meeting in Canmore. Canmore is a mountain town, right? Davos in Switzerland is a mountain town, right? So,
I didn't think of that. You're right.
Exactly. So we intend to have a conference with like 20,000 people flying in on their wonderfully kerosene, powered jets, spewing kerosene fumes across the country as they fly here, which will make no bloody difference to the climate whatsoever. And it will be a counter narrative to what the WEF and the UN are doing. And I think it's an exciting concept. We know that we have support from Danielle for this concept because it's been discussed with her. And we just need to complete the organization of this with Jordan Peterson as well. So so at some point, this will be announced, and maybe I'm a bit premature because everything hasn't all been confirmed yet. But this is what we want to do. And so the answer to the question that was posed is, how do we have a global impact? Well, this is what we're intending on doing, also to have a global impact.
That's awesome and amazing, actually, to think that. We've said it already earlier that the world is looking at Alberta, and Alberta can be the leaders that get us through this. So kudos to everybody that's involved in that, for sure.
But don't you think this is a great poke in the eye of the WEF?
Absolutely.
That we have it also in a.
It's hilarious. Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I like it. Do you want to do maybe one more question? Why don't we do one more, just because?
Go ahead. I'm still drinking blueberry juice.
And I'm still drinking my Coke and prune juice.
And the proof that it's blueberry juice is I haven't been slurring my words.
Walter, do we have one more? If not, then I'll just go back and take a look at any ones that were missed here. Just thank you, Dr. Dennis, for your presentation on what we were fed up with. I believe that the world was awakening. That's good. So lots of kudos to you guys, everybody that was involved, all the speakers on Saturday. Again, I missed it, but I will be there the next one. And that's a good question too, because I know some people asked, when is the next big meeting that we'll have?
Well, I think the members meeting was so successful.
Yeah.
And it was so much fun for everybody to be there.
Yeah.
And it was great to have 6 people on the stage
Yeah.
answering questions from the audience. It was very interactive, and it really was a lot of fun. It was a great meal that Chris and the Whistle Stop Cafe team put on too.
Yeah.
So our thought was, emanating from that meeting, is that we need to have more member meetings than just one a year.
Yeah.
And so we should have at least 2, if not more, but certainly at least 2.
Yeah.
So if we thought maybe 6 months from now we have another members meeting in a nice location, and rather than 500 people there, maybe it'd be nice to have a couple thousand people there.
Wow.
So
Yeah.
so. But no, and the volunteers did a brilliant job, and Kate Graham, who really coordinated and organized the whole event.
Yeah.
Kudos to her. She did just a brilliant job. Not only did she organize it, she was the MC, and she was she even sang at the event with with the other 2 people in the band.
Yeah.
So it was really a terrific, fun event.
That's awesome. Yeah, and definitely do more of those. And like we said, we'll get presentations out there. Maybe we'll do some more events, maybe some movies or live events and chapter events. So there, it really is like a reboot of APP that's happening now, and it'd be great to get more people involved. And if you've been involved already, then thank you so much. And if you took a little bit of a leave of absence, reach out to us again, and hopefully you can get involved with that. So
yeah, and for the listeners, help us grow the membership.
Absolutely.
Get your friends involved. Get them to come out to a meeting.
Yeah.
So
we've always said, if one person is an APP member, bring 2 people at the next meeting.
Yeah.
That's how we grow the movement, right? So
yeah. Sounds
well,
good.
yeah. Thanks again so much for coming on, Dennis. Always a wealth of information. Love it. And next Wednesday we will try and get Jeff back on. Hopefully he's not too busy in his schedule, and maybe some other familiar faces. And so with that, it's now 8:20, so I'll wish you a fabulous rest of your evening. And we hope to see you at an event soon. We have to plan an event, and then we'll hope to see you guys soon. And if not, then for sure by next Wednesday. And with that, take care, God bless, and good night, everybody.
Good night.
Thanks again.